All right. If we basically start playing right now, yeah, we have jumping, but the problem is that we can basically spam click our jump button, our space bar, and we will be able to jump forever. So we have infinite jumping, which is quite common problem. So we should deal with it. We only should be able to jump once and fall down, and doesn't matter how many times we are clicking, jumping while we are in the air, we should not be able to jump. So it also means that basically we should only be able to jump while we are on the ground. But to do that, we will need few things. Well, we will need to have some kind of sensor which will be set to at the feet of our player, for example. Well, our player doesn't have any kind of feet right now, but let's imagine that it has. So for the capsule, we will have it somewhere below, down below, where the player's feet might be. But anyway, that point will act like sensor, and it will check if we are touching this ground or not. But in order him to check if we are touching this ground or not, we can use something that is called layers. For example, let's select plane, and in the inspector we have these tags and layers, tag and layer system. And well, those ones are just like categories, and we can assign different categories to different game objects to help with our, and they will help us with our code. For example, for the plane, we can have some layer. Well, Unity has some default layers, but we can also add layers. So let's select plane, let's hit add layer, and let's type here, I don't know, ground, for example, with a capital first letter. Then I will select plane again, and I will, well, it's already assigned, but if it's not, you just need to select plane and assign this ground layer by hand to it. Okay, we have ground layer assigned to our player. Next thing will be to create some sensor that we talked about earlier. And well, we can create some empty game object which will act like sensor. So in the player, let's right click and let's select create empty. And this will create empty game object. It only has this transform component. This transform component means that game objects that just exist in the world, and that's exactly what we want. We don't need to have anything else. We just need to place this ground point. So let's call it ground check. We just need to place this ground check below our player at the level of the feet approximately. For example, I will place it around here. You don't need to be super precise, just place it somewhere like this. And that's pretty much it. Now we are ready to go ahead and start working on it with the help of our code. Now let's open our player movement, and we will need to have some new variables here. Well, we will need reference to our ground check. So for that, we can say public, and we will use type of transform since we only care about the position of the ground check. And let's call this one ground check, just like this. Well, we obviously also will need to have some reference to the layer that we created, to this ground layer. And to do that, we can say public layer mask. And let's call this one, I don't know, ground layer, just like this. And after that, we also will need to have one boolean. Now, booleans are just returning true or false, and they are good to be used in the for the checking some mechanics. For example, our boolean should check if we are on the ground or not. So if our boolean will be true, it means that we are in the ground. If our boolean will be false, it will mean that, well, we are not in the ground, we are in the air somewhere else. Okay, to create boolean, we can say private bool, and let's call this one is on ground, just like this, is on ground boolean. Now let's scroll down. And before we do this jumping logic, so before this, we should say what this boolean should be, what is on ground should be. So before the jump logic, we can say is on ground equals, and we can use something that is called physics, some method that is called physics dot raycast. Basically, this raycast throws some rays from the ground checkpoint, from this point to the ground layer, and with the help of those rays, he will check if we are on the ground or not. Very, very simple. And in order everything to work, it needs to have few parameters. First, it needs to know what is our ground checkpoint. For that, we can say ground check dot position, right? Then it needs to know what direction should our rays go, and we obviously need to have some down direction. For that, we can say vector3 dot down, comma. After that, we should say what's radius to have. Well, basically, we need to have a little bit of radius for these rays, so that ray knows what radius to check. Well, since our player is small, we can have something like 0.25 f as a radius. And well, after that, it needs to know what layer should we check, and we want to check our ground. Well, what is the name of the layers? Ground layer is name, so we will pass ground layer here. That's pretty much it. Now we have this boolean is on ground, which will check if we are on the ground or not. And only thing that is left is to add some condition into our actual jumping. So after our first closing bracket here, what we can say this sign. By the way, this is end sign, it means end, and here we will pass is on ground. Now, in order our jumping to happen, both of these conditions should be true. So if one of them is false, basically we will not be able to jump. Now, when we will be on the ground, so when we will start our game, we can obviously touch the space bar, so this condition can be true. And also, we will be indeed on the ground, so this condition will also be true. So we will jump. But when we will be in the air, yeah, we can still click our space bar, so this condition can be true while we are in the air, but this condition will be false because, in fact, we will not be in the ground, so our jumping won't happen anymore. I hope it makes sense. We can save the script and we can go back and everything will work just fine with this method, and that will be it for our jumping. So let's select player. We should add a few things. First of all, we need to add this ground check here. So I will drag ground check and drop it here. And I will change ground layer from nothing to ground. And now let's hit play and let's check. Now doesn't matter how much I click my jump key while we are in the air. We can only jump once and that's it. Yeah, everything is working, so we can save our scene.